Hey everybody, Sarah Ulmer here with Y'all Politics. We are sitting down with Dr. Carrie Wright, the state superintendent from Mississippi, to talk a little bit about schools going back amidst a COVID-19 pandemic. Dr. Wright, thanks for joining us today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Sarah.
Absolutely. Talk to me a little bit about just what this has looked like for kids going back to school right now.
Well, it kind of depends on where you are because the districts have the ability to choose to either open in person, everybody, or virtually, everybody, or a mixture of the two, a hybrid, if you will, some in person and some virtual. So I think that they're trying to do what's best, I think, for the area of their state. And I think, there are various hot spots across the state. So I think some were a little bit more cautious about in person than others. But I listened to Tim Martin this morning on the Gallo show, and he did a great job of describing what's going on in Clinton and the in-person as well as virtual. He's got a hybrid going, and he's really pleased with the way it's going so far.
Right. So as far as cases and quarantine right now, are we seeing a significant amount of that? Is there an overall way that that's being handled, or is that still being kind of left up to the district when a case might break out in a school, how they're going to handle it?
It's a good question. We've been working very closely with Dr. Dobbs, the state health officer, and Dr. Byers, the state epidemiologist. And all along, I mean, I'm in contact with them. At the beginning, it was almost daily, and now it's about weekly. But they've given the superintendents a lot of really good advice, a decision-making matrix, what to do if there is an outbreak, how do you define an outbreak, who needs to be quarantined, who doesn't, and for how long, et cetera. So I think that I think all the superintendents are really doing a really good job of following that, and the social distancing, taking temperatures before kids come in the building and teachers come in the building, limiting the number of adults in the building to just those that should be there. And so I think, cleaning buses and all that entails, because they were given a lot of really good information, not only from our own state health officers, but also from the CDC. And so we've been working with them, the superintendents, all along throughout this whole thing to provide them the resources that they need.
So through some of that CARES Act appropriation that we saw, there was some money to go towards broadband expansion, obviously to help for some of the distance learning that's still going to be taking place over the next couple of months at the least. What are some of those expansion needs that schools are
Sure.
particularly interested in?
Well, connectivity is huge, and I can't understate that enough. But it's not just Mississippi. Being a state chief, I'm on calls at least twice a week with other state chiefs, and this is consistent across the nation. There's particularly in rural states and rural areas of states. So House Bill 1788 gave us $50 million to try to work on connectivity. Part of that is broadband, part of that are data plans, part of that is hotspots, because everybody had different needs. And then Senate Bill 3044 gave us $150 million to focus on devices and learning management systems, et cetera. So we have just now finalized all of that and are working now to get those devices in students' hands. But they're going to either be Wi-Fi or cellular enabled. So depending on where you are in the state, you may want more cellular devices than Wi-Fi, and vice versa in other places. So we worked with every single district and gave them a needs assessment. What is it that you need? And what kind of devices do you need, et cetera, et cetera. And then we tallied all that up, and that's how we worked with the vendors. And so each district should be getting exactly what they asked for.
So do you feel confident that our schools and our students and teachers are going to be in a more manageable situation going forward than, say, maybe we were in the spring when the shutdowns just kind of were sprung upon us?
I would say that is a true statement, Sarah. Is it optimal? That's another issue, because we can't guarantee right now connectivity for all yet. This is just a step one. This is a huge step. I don't know of another state, quite honestly, that is taking such a massive undertaking on in terms of a statewide initiative. But I think that we are in a much better place, because now we know what worked and what didn't work. And so I think superintendents are planning around that. We at the State Department have been providing a lot of virtual professional development for teachers, so to try and get them better prepared so that they can know what to expect when they came back.
Do you think this is going to have any long-term impact on how we do school once COVID is gone, once things are in some sort of new normal? Do you think the availability of this virtual learning is going to have a real day-to-day impact, or is this something that, we'll put aside once the emergency is over?
No, I think you're going to see a real change in the way education is provided. I think that, children, everybody needs connectivity. Everybody needs that. And we're blessed because we happen to live and be in a place that getting on the internet or getting on a Zoom call is just second nature, but it should be second nature for everybody, not just some people. And so I think that's the part of the long term that we need to make sure that all children have that kind of access. But it's also the ability then to pivot. We've had weather, disasters, if you will, in our state. We're right in the middle of the tornado alley kind of an idea. And so people need to be prepared if they have to stay at home, or in the northern part of our state, even with inclement weather, right? That,
Right.
they can still continue learning, although not being in the, four walls of a school building. So I think that, I think you're going to see a lot of creativity actually coming through with this.
Absolutely. So recently, the teacher initiative was passed and signed finally into law.
Mhm.
It's been a never ending legislative
Yeah.
session this year. We've seen a lot go on. How is that going to be dispensed? How soon will teachers start to see the benefit of that?
Well, those dollars are calculated based on their last accountability grade.
Mhm.
So there's a formula that's used. If you came up a letter grade, it's so many dollars, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's all calculated, and then that money is then sent directly to the districts. And typically, if memory serves in the past, it's usually arrived around late November, early December. It's kind of like right before the holidays. And so teachers will then be receiving those dollars from that. So we're really glad to see that the teacher recognition program did in fact pass.
Absolutely. Instead of having to wait till January or something like that, been a lot going on this year.
There has been, there has been.
So a lot of people have had questions about state testing. How is that going to be impacted this year? Can you speak to that a little?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Well, right now we are not applying for a waiver. That doesn't mean that our testing regimen might look different this year than it did last year or the year before, because I think it's very, very important that we get a handle on what education looks like across our state.
Right.
How badly did this COVID-19 impact learning, and where are we as a state? We had been making historic gains before this happened, and everybody was taking a great deal of pride in that. Not only our statewide assessment, but with the national assessment of education progress, our graduation rate. I mean, there was every indicator we were monitoring was heading in the right direction. So we've really got to get a handle on this, and we're already in conversation. Our technical advisory committee, which is a group of 5 or 6 of the nation's brightest psychometricians, we meet with them on a regular basis, and we're having a meeting at the end of this month to begin talking about what would testing look like, what should testing look like, and do we decouple it from accountability? Because a lot of times people conflate the two. The statewide assessment is one thing unto itself. The accountability model is another thing. So do we then just decouple that in some way moving forward? So I think that that's all part of the discussion that we're having, and I think it's a really important one, because I don't want people anxious about this, but I've also got to get a handle on where we are with children. And it's hard to do that without a single assessment, maybe a sampling. We just don't know yet, but we know we need to find out.
What do you see as the biggest obstacle that schools and administrations are facing right now in kind of this transition to, for most of them, more of a virtual learning situation, or even just the preparedness for that to happen?
Yeah, I think that's the biggest challenge that any of the districts will have, is making sure that it's well thought out, but they've got to be nimble enough, because we've been warned that when flu season hits, this is going to get worse. And so they've got to be nimble enough to pivot. So if they're in person now, they still need to have plan B, right? Which is, what happens if I can't bring everybody in, or even bring people in on a part-time basis? So I think all the superintendents are thinking about that. I've had a small cadre of superintendents that have really been working on the first part was called considerations for reopening, and they did it in chunks of June, July, and August. And so now that group is now working on September, October, November, and then thinking about what should they be thinking about the superintendents across the state for the next 3 months. So that has been very helpful, and I think the superintendents have really appreciated that. And it's just their thinking around, here's what should be first and foremost in your thoughts. And now that we know a lot more than we did about how COVID impacts children, I think that needs to be taken into consideration as well.
Just for a little clarification, I've had several teachers ask for more clarification on the 180-day rule. How has that shifted? Can you speak? I know that y'all issued something about a week or two ago about those days being somewhat flexible. Can you kind of talk a little bit about what that looks like?
One of the things when we provided flexibility to the districts last year, but we did not waive, in the spring, we waived the 180-day rule because we had no idea how long this was going to be. But coming into the fall, we did not. We really wanted 180 days of instruction. But I think what happened when the governor decided to delay the school districts in those counties, it kind of caught them a little short. So we said, okay, for those districts, they probably need some flexibility right now. So let's wait up to 10 days for the districts that or in the counties that he identified. So that was really it. It has caused some confusion, I can say. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring it back to the August 27th board meeting to provide the clarity so that all superintendents know exactly what that does mean. But it was really intended initially just for those districts and counties that the governor stated in his executive order.
Right. Anything else you want to add about, we are seeing a few less numbers in the past couple of days. I know that's got to bring a little bit of relief as schools have gone back.
Absolutely.
Anything else that y'all are looking at or considering over the next few months in order to just kind of deal with school during crazy times?
Yeah, exactly. Well, the biggest thing for us is going to be the implementation of this digital learning plan, because as all those devices start arriving and the learning management systems start arriving and our professional development gets kicked into gear in a big way, that's the biggest thing that we're focusing on, is making sure that we can get those devices out as quickly as we can and get everybody set up as quickly as we can. So I just want to also say a big thank you to the legislature, both the House and the Senate, because the provision of Senate Bill 3044 and House Bill 1788 for a total of $200 million for the children of the state and for the teachers of the state speaks volumes. And so I really just want to say hats off to them, because I'm sure it wasn't an easy decision, but we're so proud, and we're so proud of being able to do what we're doing for all children and teachers across the state. Absolutely.
Dr. Wright, thank you so much for joining us today. And I know it'll be an interesting couple of months as we start to face the flu season and see how this is all going to play out. But I do appreciate you talking to us, and we'll stay in touch as things change.